Let's set the scene. Keyword there, set the scene. Let's picture the time when baseball was in full swing, or let's fast forward when baseball is back in full swing, and it's coming. It's a perfect summer day, and as you approach the field, the murmur of baseball chatter can be heard. Then you walk into the stadium, get your hot dog, and in my case, stop by to see if there's any new hats for sale. Then you start to walk to your seat, and the field comes into view. That moment where you leave the shade of the mezzanine, underneath the mezzanine, and the walkway into the sun to the bleachers where the full field is in bright view. Every game I go to, that very moment where the sun hits me at the same time, the full field is in view, is my is this heaven moment. There's so many interlocking parts that come into play to give me that moment. The facility itself, the promotion sales that got me the ticket, the pageantry of the scene, and yes, to me, probably the biggest component, the field itself. A friend of mine who's a high school coach in Indiana posted a picture the other day of his freshly mowed field with those perfect straight lines. And my reply to him was, you can have Rembrandt and Jackson Pollock. The lines of a natural grass baseball field, in my opinion, are my favorite form of art. But there's more to it than just mowing the yard, of course, and many parts and people involved in managing the field itself. There is a lot involved in setting the scene on the field to give people like me that moment. So in this episode of Careers in Baseball, where we are going all across Indiana and talking to people who give me those moments, the people who are behind the scenes in baseball and making a career of it, we're talking to the head guy that manages, in my opinion, one of the nicest fields in baseball, Joey Stevenson. And Joey, I appreciate you joining in here with us today. I was introduced to you by a mutual friend, Andy Gossel, who anybody who follows baseball online, they know his field. He brought me in touch with you, and thanks for joining us today. We're talking field operations. This, to me, is you've got, my dream job. I say that to a lot of people in these careers, but you really do. And like that scene behind you right there, you are painting the scene for people who come to enjoy a baseball game, and it's no small thing. First of all, there's no baseball going on right now. How's Joey Stevenson doing? How's what's going on right now with no baseball currently? It's on the horizon, but what are we doing right now, just like in your personal life, and what kind of management does the field need here off season still, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. As far as what I'm doing now, I mean, it's not business as normal, but at the same time, the field doesn't know that there's a pandemic going on. So, as far as when I come through the front doors of Victory Field and I go out onto the field, it is business as normal because we still have to manage the field. It's still growing like it normally would. It's doing all the things that it did last April and last May. So the way we care for it is almost the exact same way. It still takes the same amount of people that we have on staff to maintain it. So that hasn't changed. What has changed, and you do notice when you go out in the field that you do get kind of depressed. It is depressing because we all have a love for the game of baseball, almost like a romantic feeling towards it. And when you're on that field, you expect to smell the popcorn and smell the grass and hear the fans and the crack of the bat and all that stuff, but you just don't hear it. So that part is sad. But we're going to remain optimistic and hopeful that we do get some baseball in 2020. But as far as me personally, it's strange. It's a strange feeling. I've never had a 9 to 5 job before, and the pandemic has sort of created that for us, where we're not here from 8 a.m. until midnight every night because we have baseball games. I'm here 9 to 5. So that part has changed, and it's weird doing this for since I was 15 years old. So I'm 36 now. So quite some time. And it's different. It's weird to go home every day at 5:30 and cook dinner and spend time with my family, which it's been awesome. It's been super, super nice. But at the same time, you miss baseball. But I really have enjoyed, the nights at home with our 5-year-old daughter and my wife and all that sort of stuff. So if there's been one good positive from everything, it's been that.
Well, you touched on a lot of points there, and I'm hoping we're going to hit at a lot of them there. You talked about, you got into this at 15, so we're going to talk about your background leading up to this. You talked about, you kind of hinted at the day-to-day operations. We're going to get into some of the specifics of that. But what I want to know as a fan, and that's all I am as a fan, is what's the cool part of this job? What's the part, we all have jobs, no matter how much you love your job. We all have to roll up our sleeves sometime and just do the work. But I know coming to a job where you're on a baseball field, what are some of those moments where Joey Stevenson says, man, I get paid to do this? Or you're just a kid living the dream saying, I am exactly where I need to be. What are some of those moments for you and your staff as you work there at Victory Field, like you mentioned, for the Indianapolis Indians?
Yeah, I guess just thinking about that now, what I think is the coolest thing. It's probably changed the older I get, but the one thing that comes to mind is I just miss, you get here at 9 a.m. or whatever time in the morning, and you're taking your first stripes on the infield grass, and there's only probably 4 people in the building. Our food vendors are starting to pop some of their popcorn, and you get that smell, but there's nobody here. And it's just, you're mowing the grass, you're prepping that field. People slowly start to trickle in as far as employees go. But just that moment in the morning when there's nobody here. And what you're doing at 9 a.m. is setting the stage for that first pitch at 7:05. That's what I enjoy the most. And then I guess the secondary part would be kind of what you see in my background is when we finished at 7:04 and we're walking off the field. And we've done everything we could that day to give the players the best field that we could possibly give them. And then it's up for them to play on. It's up for the fans to enjoy and all those sort of things that go with it.
Well, just a couple thoughts on what you were saying there. Number one, as far as, the fans enjoying it, you create the canvas, then it's a beautiful canvas it is. And then looking at that background, you got one of the best office views, I think, in the state right there with the Indianapolis skyline in the background and beautiful Victory Field. So let's back up now. Let's go to, elementary school or higher, elementary school through junior high, high school, college. Let's take that track. And when was it that you decided that, what, I want to get involved, either generally something to do with, be it landscaping or something like that, or specifically, in baseball, so when was that match right there as far as, okay, I'm pretty good at this. I want to pursue it education-wise, but it's got to be in baseball. When did the baseball element come into your decision-making as far as what you actually do as well? Because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of different, I say landscaping, but engineering, of any level that deals with that. When did you marry in the baseball element and say, I want to do this, but I want to do it on a baseball field?
Yeah, I would say so. I grew up on a family farm in Illinois. My parents still farm just about 2,800 acres of corn and beans. And so that's what kind of got my love for, playing in the dirt, growing things, is kind of where that started. And at 15, my dad played in an over 40 league basketball league. And he happened to play with our golf course superintendent. And I asked my dad, that I wanted to work at the golf course. And he asked him, and he just said, yep, show up Monday with your social security card and we'll get you started. And that's what I did. And my first job, I was probably picking up sticks or raking sticks at some spot on the golf course. But I still remember that first time going to the golf course and out onto the course itself. Where it started for baseball, just was my dad. He's been a baseball fan. My favorite movie, Field of Dreams. But I played baseball, and I think what got me into a career in sports was the fact that I was no longer good enough to continue playing, but I could still be in the game. So I eventually started working at the golf course in the mornings, and then I would work for the Joliet Jackhammers at night. And then that eventually led me to Purdue. And then I was pretty set on working in the golf industry. And we actually came to a field trip to Victory Field. It would have been probably in 2002, my freshman year at Purdue. And would have met Mike Buchholder at the time. But I think that's what ultimately helped me make the switch, was actually visiting this facility back in 2002 before I had any clue that I'd eventually work here. And even going back way before that, I think ultimately what imprinted in my mind, I still remember the first time going to Comiskey Park when my parents took me to a White Sox game. And I still remember walking, it's to that picturesque moment where you walk through the concourse and out onto your seats and you see the field. I mean, I still have that memory in my brain. And then just 20 years later, visiting Victory Field in 2002. And then I said, I made that switch in my brain that said, I don't know if golf is the way for me. And that's kind of what helped cement that switch to baseball for me.
And you mentioning golf, because how related are the two? You've got at a golf course, obviously the landscape is everything. So, speaking from an industry standpoint, looking at what you do and what a person I don't even, what would the title be in golf? It wouldn't be field operations. It would just be the
Superintendent.
Yeah. Okay. The superintendent. What relation is there if we look at this from a career standpoint, and we're going to talk about your college education here in a second, but with what you do and what a golf superintendent does, how closely are they related?
I think on the ground level, they're extremely related. I mean, it's very, very similar. But as you dig more into it, I would find it almost impossible for me to go to golf or a golf course superintendent to come to professional sports. Just because it's so similar, but it's so different at the same time. I don't know how to compare it. But it's strange like that. But all in all, it's similar but different at the same time. But where in a golf course situation you have hundreds of acres to manage, where I have 2.5 acres. So I think at a golf course you have to manage some expectations. You can't be perfect all the time, where here we've got 4 people to manage 2.5 acres. It's expected, or at least I expect it to be perfect all the time, because we can make it perfect. And that includes anything from scraping gum off the dugout floors to cleaning wall pads to everything we do on the field. Where at a golf course, you don't always have that time or that manpower to make those changes.
Right. Well, and a couple things there as we move into maybe talk about your education is what I'm hearing. There is 2 things. Number one, there is a science to all this. Like I mentioned at the intro, it's not just mowing lawn. There's a science to it. And number two, I would think, going back to talking about the golf superintendent versus, field operations with the minor league baseball team or just baseball in general, the schedule, the golf course, you're not golfing when the sun goes down, and baseball, day games, night games, all year round. In Indiana, there's not a lot of golf in the winter, but that baseball field still needs maintained in the winter. There's a science to it. So let's move into your education. You talked about going to Purdue. Tell us about your degree and, what all opportunities does that degree open up generally? Obviously, I think talking offline, it led you to where you are today. Obviously, it's a very direct path to where you are today. But what other opportunities would it lead up to as well? So talk about your experience at Purdue, what the degree was, what all it entails, maybe some of the technology that you didn't realize was there before you got into the education element, and then we'll hit that again, later. But let's go into your time there at Purdue.
Yeah. So I went to Purdue 2002 to 2006, studied turf science at the time. So, I mean, there's a lot of parallels between maintaining turf and row crops, corn and beans particularly. So a lot of those things were interchangeable as far as our classes go, but it's a science-based degree. So, I mean, the hardest class I would have taken would have been organic chemistry, which is, when I think about it, I lose sleep at night. But I'm in there with, people studying to be pharmacists and doctors and scientists and things like that. But the degree itself, it made me a more rounded person, if that's the right term. So I had the opportunity to grow up and mature at Purdue. That's ultimately, I think, what helped me do the most. But you learn the ins and outs, the science part of maintaining grass, and maintaining any sort of plant in general. But for me, I think ultimately what it did help me the best with was networking, and how important that was in this industry to not only network with our professors and our teachers, but the 20 or so kids in my class. I still speak with most of them today, whether it be text or Facebook or whatever. I still keep in touch with them, and their network has helped me. You've gotten to know, it got my foot in the door at Victory Field with Mike Buchholder, who was soon to be the groundskeeper for the Philadelphia Phillies after he left here. But ultimately, it just it helped me get my head on straight. It helped me go from an 18-year-old to an adult, and just learn everything I could about growing grass the correct way. And that's honestly what it probably did the most for me.
Well, one thing you mentioned there, and this is kind of a recurring theme in all of these videos we're doing on careers in baseball, is that networking component. None of us are an island. We need people, and as well as industry resources, whether it be, subscribing to different kinds of news or technology updates or things like that. So let's talk about that as we segue out of Purdue, and let's, talk about that networking as far as, your jobs and the people that kind of segmented you into where you are today, or maybe you came right into the Indians. I want to touch on that path that got you to where you are today, career-wise, as well as what do you look at? What resources do you have? You were talking about networking and still talking to these guys. Are there any other resources that you use for your job, industry resources, to stay up to date on, emerging trends or technology or things like that? So, talk about some of the jobs you had between Purdue and here, or opportunities, or the people you met that got you here, and some of the things you still turn to, to stay up to date on things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, my first job would have been at the golf course, and then went from there to the Joliet Jackhammers, then to Purdue, and then to the Philadelphia Phillies, and then to the Kansas City Royals for a summer, and then eventually here in 2007. But just along the way, so when I started at the Joliet Jackhammers, the head groundskeeper at the time was Jeff Eckert. He was from Kankakee, Illinois, but he eventually moved back to Florida, and he's now the groundskeeper at the New York Yankees spring training. Eventually got to meet my professor at Purdue, Cale Bigelow, who knew Mike Bookholder, who was at the Phillies. Got my foot in the door there, and then that helped me get to the Kansas City Royals. And the folks I've met there have, some of those guys now work for St. Louis Cardinals, San Diego Padres, you name it. And just you pick up friendships along the way that become resources for you. And eventually you wind up at 36 years old, and I know most of, if not every, AAA groundskeeper in the United States, and a handful of single A and double A and spring training guys and girls. And it's just crazy how that one simple connection of getting your foot in the door, how much I think it obviously helped that I think I was an okay employee to become friends with these folks. And one door led to the next, that led to the next, that eventually led to where I am today. So when you sit back and think about it, yeah, just the not like the family tree of people that I know in this industry all came from going to Purdue, and that one foot in the door to get to know the Phillies groundskeeper.
Well, I'll tell you, just a shout out to Purdue. You know, I've heard that they have that degree, but just hearing what you're saying there's probably a good lineage coming from Purdue for people to do what you do across the country. Just a fantastic program, another great Indiana school. You know, a couple things you hinted on there that are also recurring themes in this, you know, is the people that helped you get to where you are. But also, I'll bring it back to one thing you said earlier that I liked, and I would guess that you would kind of reiterate this, because as you're at those early on jobs, I've known you now for 10 minutes, and I know enough to say that you're not the guy that says, "Well, I don't do that." You know, you're the guy that says, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to do what needs done." I say that in follow up to one thing you mentioned early on, which is, day-to-day operations. You're doing everything from scraping gum off of dugout seats and things like that. So, these people you meet, you've got that attitude that I'm not here just to make the field look good. I'm going to do whatever it takes for the field in general. You establish that good reputation for what you do, not just the artwork that you do on the green and the brown out there behind you, but just getting the job done. So you've created that relationship with these people, and they know that this is a guy that's going to do the work. That gets you the reputation to get you to where you are today. So let's talk about the day-to-day with where you're at now. We could probably spend a 2-hour session just on that. Because there's off season, there's during season, there's game day, there's non-game day. So let's narrow it down. Maybe we're not starting in any order. Let's talk about game day.
Mm-hmm.
It's game day at Victory Field. Hardy the Hat Guy's in that building behind you there, and he's chomping at the bit. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. He's going to get off of work and head over to Victory Field and catch a game. What's Joey Stevenson and his crew been doing all day to prepare that field for them, so I can have that moment when I come to the game?
Yeah, I guess that's the joy about working in field operations, or just being in a small business in general, is you realize things don't get done unless we actually do them. So it's not like I can tell our 15th employee to go scrape gum or mow the field. It's one of the 4 of us has to do it to get everything that we want done. So a typical game day for us is at typically at night we get in around 9 a.m. And we have from 9 a.m. until about 12:30 to get our work done, to get the stage set. So that entails anywhere from that's mowing the field every day. We clean the warning track, clean our dugouts, make sure our mounds and plates are repaired and where they need to be for the game that night. The most important thing we do is our work on the infield skin, the dirt. So at 9:15 a.m. we start nail dragging our infield, which is just it's a drag with probably 500 nails in it. And the infield was soaked the night before to where there was standing water. So we come in that day and it's fairly dry. So we work the nail drag in, and that's going to help break the surface. It's going to help remove any cleat marks from the night before or any small depressions, and it's going to allow us to get that top 1/8 of an inch to where we can we can add water, we can take away water, we can add material, we can remove material on the surface. It's going to help us maintain that infield skin consistently. So once mowing's finished, probably about 10:30, we then nail drag one more time. And then we take a float, we call it. It's just this big long float board on a rake handle, and we float the infield material to where it's consistent all throughout. It's a consistent level. So we want about 1/8 of an inch of conditioner on the field to cover the surface of our infield mix. So that could mean we have to add some calcined clay or have to remove some of that. But that usually takes us till about 11:30 is hopefully when we're doing our final drag in the infield. And then we flood the infield one more time to where there's standing water. We typically go eat our lunch, then drag the warning track. After lunch, we'll water usually one more time, but usually by 2:00, the team is starting to work their way outside. And anything from early work, from ground balls to simulated games to outfield work, that all goes from 2:00 until the home team gets it until 5 p.m. So we're out there helping them move screens, drag in between, add water if we can. Then the visiting team goes from 5 to 6. During that time, our night crew's starting to show up. So they're getting changed. They're cleaning the shop, cleaning our equipment. And also we're repairing bullpens while batting practice is going on. And then once batting practice is over, it's kind of like organized chaos where the 8 of us are getting all the screens and the green mesh off the field. We're dragging one more time. We're chalking the lines. We put that final coat of water on it. It's just that light coat. And then as the game progresses, it actually the infield starts to pull up some of the moisture that we had introduced earlier in the morning. So that's what provides that consistent playing surface, that dirt surface throughout the evening. And then we drag 3rd and 6th inning, change bases, hope the home team wins so we don't have to play the bottom of the 9th. And then we're here for about an hour after each game. So repairing the mound and plate, cleaning the dugouts, dragging the infield one more time, rolling the infield, picking up chalk lines. And then we determine later that night at 11:30 if we're going to tarp for rain overnight. If not, we go home, and then we're back at 9 a.m. to do it all over again.
I'll tell you what, that's I love my job. I definitely love my hobby, but I'd take your work day any day of the week. As I'm hearing you talk here, I'm one of those guys. I love mowing my yard. I take pride in my yard, and I'm one of those, those old timers that at the end of the day, you've put 4 hours of work into mowing your yard. You take your hat off and rub your hand through your hair, and you say, "Yep, that looks pretty good." I'm guessing you still have those moments too, right? Where's that moment for you where you're like, okay, we got it, it's good, right before game time, where you look back and you're like, yeah, that's a good looking yard right there?
Yeah. I would probably say, yeah, during the game when we actually can we'll sometimes sneak up to the roof of the building and get up and watch a few innings. That's probably that moment that we have for that. But always just being I don't know if anyone who's in this business is partially somewhat insane a little bit, but you almost never feel that you did everything you could. Even like now when there's no games, there's still, there's always things you can do, or you feel like you need to have done to make it perfect. And they're just little things. But yeah, we never truly feel that we got everything done. But that moment when you can go up to the roof and just you see the skyline, you see the field, you see the players and the fans. When you see that's when you really, it sinks in for you that there's days that you cuss this job and you wish it would stop raining. But then you kind of almost live for those moments where you can enjoy just an inning or two.
Well, I want to segue into talking about your crew there for a minute, but just a kind of a side moment comment, highlight for any of you younger kids watching this series. A couple of things that he's saying that I think are, again, recurring themes. We're talking to people that are at the pinnacle of, the career in their profession. Some of the things he's saying right there is there's always something to do. And if we don't do it, it doesn't get done, no matter what it is, from the high tech stuff, the technology you're dealing with and all the machinery down to scraping gum off the seats. I want to highlight that again, just because that's no matter what career, as we're talking careers in this series, no matter what career you go into, baseball, non-baseball, it's that you got to get it done, pay the dues, and don't ever say that that's not your job. You're too good for this. Nope. You got to get it done. I just wanted to highlight that point again. It's another great reason I'm talking to you here. But let's talk about your crew. I see another side thing here as I was looking at MILB.com's page for front office staff for the Indianapolis Indians. I see, there's certainly more than this, I'm assuming. It shows 72 positions, careers, positions at some level, otherwise jobs in general for the Indianapolis Indians, 72 of them. You mentioned 4 people in your full-time staff. I think, yourself, Adam, Grant, and Morgan, I think it was, that you mentioned, but you have all these other crews as well, and when the game starts. So what I'd like to talk about is that composition from a career standpoint. Are these 3 other people with you? Is this their career, or they have other things as well? And these night crews, these off-season crews, do they have other positions with the Indians? Or, tell me about all the positions involved with field operations, part-time. You mentioned you did some internship. Are there internship opportunities? Let's look at the staff perspective, all the people involved, what they're doing, what they're responsible for, I'll shut up here in a second and let you speak, but, I'm looking at some of the titles. Your title is Director of Field Operations. I think Adam's title, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is Field Operations Manager. Then there's Field Operations Assistants. Then you have these other people. Let's look at all of them from a perspective of what career opportunities, not just with the Indians, but, from a career perspective, what all is involved, what positions, careers are involved, other than just the one guy, the head guy like yourself.
Yeah. So I talked about like my route here. Adams, our field ops manager, his is different, where he went to Grace College and studied sports communications. And he didn't fall into this, but his love for baseball and just hard work led him to a career in sports turf management. So he eventually got on the crew at Fort Wayne Tin Caps, and he networked his way in there to Omaha Storm Chasers as the assistant, and eventually led him to here. So there's no one way to get into field operations. There's like the head groundskeeper at Fort Wayne was I believe his career started in radio. He was a radio, I don't know if he's a DJ, but that's what led him to. You just had love. You just have love for the game and the sport, and if you love it enough, you'll work hard at it and get to where you need to go. So that's somewhat unique to this industry. But as far as our field ops seasonal assistant and our interns, typically those students are turf grass students. Like this year we have a gentleman from Purdue and a lady from Ohio State. But yeah, their goal is to get their education and work their way up through the ranks in sports turf some form or fashion. As far as our night crew goes, so it's the four of us that are, I would consider full-time, that are here from 9 a.m. until 11 p.m. each night on a game day. Our part-time crew, they come in 2 hours before each game. So that includes anyone from high school kids to retired folks, to teachers who have summer, who aren't that busy during the summer, to I'm trying to think of who's on our crew, but it's high school coaches, it's high school baseball kids, it's people who have no interest in baseball at all. Just anyone who wants to help out. And yeah, they range from all different backgrounds. But yeah, they just help, but they get in 2 hours before each game, help us do all the lighter lifting when it comes to getting the field ready, chalking lines, holding the hose, taking down screens and cages, and cleaning some things up for us.
Well, I know a hat collector that would pay you to come out there and help. So, when I think of who are the guys of your crew that are, it starts to pour rain, they're pulling the turf out. Who are those guys? Is that you four, some of the assistants, everybody, all hands on deck? Who's pulling the turf when it starts raining?
Yeah, so in game, it would be the 8 of our crew, and then it's also there's 14 interns that we have throughout the whole ballpark. So you mentioned, I think we had 72 employees. I think we have about 50 that are full-time. And then there's probably 13 to 15 interns that are in the marketing department, social media department, sponsorship, tickets, stadium operations, community relations, all those parts of our organization. And they're our tarp crew. So when in the game, when we tell the umpire that rain's coming, we should go, we send out we usually, it's on a group text, so it doesn't go over the radio. But hey, report to the visiting dugout, and the 15 or so interns show up in the dugout, and then we're just at a moment's notice. And they're the interns, they're not turf people. They never will be. But it just goes to show just how important, the most important tool that we have at this ballpark is our field tarp, to protect. We have 70 openings to provide baseball to the fans of the Indianapolis Indians. So if we lose that opportunity, it's an opportunity lost for the whole organization. So I believe it was the year before we played, we had 0 rainouts. Last year we had 2, I think, but ultimately we end up playing about 98% of our games. Working here, you would think we almost rain out every game, with just the calls that we get from fans, just the amount of time we spend, watching the radar. But we play all of our games for the most part, and it's because of that field tarp to protect.
Well, and another kind of fun question as far as who does that. You've got I'm sure the Indians marketing and promotion department has came down to you sometime. It's like, all right, 7th inning stretch, we want you guys to go out there and rake the field and do a dance while we're doing it, or do something funny. Who draws the short straw, or who says, I want to be that guy that's raking the field while they're playing the music and we got to dance to some 70s and 80s song or something like that? How often does that go out where you guys are, the call's coming down. You guys got to do something fun or funny. And, how often do you get that? And, how's that play out as far as who's the one that has to go out there and entertain?
Um, we haven't been tasked with that yet. But that usually comes from somebody upstairs. And that's the cool thing about working in minor league baseball is that there are only 50 of us. It's not like a major league team where there's 500 people there. We're all, it feels like we're all family here. So it's not uncommon for Hayden in the front office to come down and ask us to do a dance. And it's not uncommon for us to be like, that's fine. We're happy to do it because they've got respect for us and we've got respect for them. And it's all kind of like we're one big family trying to ultimately provide entertainment. That's the business we're all in.
Right. As we get closer to wrapping things up, I want to end and talk about that whole employment environment. But before we do, I want to look at kind of the industry as I look at that beautiful field behind you. Luckily, as we talked about off air, the minor league fields in Indiana are all grass. And I personally prefer grass, but there are some beautiful turf out there, non-grass turf, artificial turf, we've heard it called different things out there. So looking at the industry, a lot of people are doing that, even high schools, just because there's maybe less maintenance over time. But let's look at the industry, as the Indians, the Fort Wayne Tin Caps you mentioned, South Bend Cubs, the Evansville Otters down south, a lot of fields all across the state. Do you worry about, or with your career, if Victory Field went artificial turf, how does that change your career? Or how does that do you worry in talking to the people like your classmates and people in the network of your profession across the country? Are they worried that everything's going turf? Or will, your job, there's still not maintenance free if you go artificial turf. So how would your job change? Or, looking at it from a career standpoint, someone wanting to get into it, do they still pursue the same education? And will it benefit them with artificial turfs as well? So just kind of maybe provide some input at that.
Yeah. I would be lying if I said I didn't think about it, which I do. I think when you truly run the numbers though on if Victory Field were to switch to artificial turf, it is still miles and miles cheaper to maintain natural grass. It's honestly not even close. So that's, and when you see major league teams go into turf, it's usually typically an indoor stadium, where their ultimate goal is to run concerts through their numerous events, where baseball is almost secondary. So some of those, I get it, especially in a dome stadium. But as far as an outdoor stadium, it's significantly less expensive to maintain natural grass. Because even if we were to go to artificial turf, I would assume that we would still have a dirt infield, a dirt mound and plate. So all the maintenance, we spend 80% of our maintenance on those skin surfaces. The downfall with artificial turf, and it's probably even going to be highlighted more now that we're in this pandemic, is when a Major League Baseball player spits on the artificial turf, or any bodily fluids get on that turf, it's got to be cleaned. It's just like your carpet at home, where if that happens on a natural field like we have here, the turf naturally takes care of it. It's washed away by rain. The field's constantly growing. The turf actually can help you in that. The grass can actually help you in that situation. So that's the benefits to to grass. It's ultimately safer, it's cheaper, and it's natural. So I don't see many teams doing that. I mean, just to throw out numbers, where we could regrass our entire field for probably 200,000. Where if we decided to go to synthetic turf, we would be north of $1 million. And then the same surfaces, they've got to be replaced every 6 to 10 years, regardless, natural or grass. So then the replacement fee on a natural grass is about a 250,000, where to regrass and a synthetic turf field is anywhere from I would say 200 to 400,000 every 8 years or so, and it requires the same amount of maintenance. It's a different maintenance where you're not mowing every day, but you've got to disinfect that playing surface. You've got to fluff up the crumb rubber particles. It's the same amount of maintenance. It's just a different maintenance.
Yep. Well, and you know, as we talked about this offline, we both know, like Marchand, I think his name is an artist with putting in the artificial turfs and a lot of things he does, and others throughout the state. Like I said, I personally prefer the grass field. That was some good information that you provided there. I didn't know the difference as far as cost of upkeep or you know, upfront costs, things like that. So there's a difference. I think there's pros and cons for both, to each their own. I personally prefer the grass and the beautiful things you guys do. Let's as we wrap things up, let's, you know, a couple things. The 50 full-time employees. Right now we're in this pandemic, you know, that's one of the sub reasons that I wanted to do this video series, is I wanted to kind of expose that, you know, it's not just players and coaches that are hurting right now because there's no baseball. Baseball is an industry. You know, it's not for fans like me. We get to reap the reward of people who do this as a profession from people like you. And it is a profession, it is a career, and there are 50 people, you know, like you said, give or take, full-time careers with the Indians. You know, we're going to talk to the Tin Caps in another episode of this, and you know, they have a lot of employees too. Same way with the Cubs. You know, all across, you know, there's a lot of collegiate summer league teams throughout Indiana that have a lot of teams. These are employees that count on a season. So, you know, looking forward, from your standpoint, field operations, you know, is the industry worried with some of the people you talk to across the country? Is the industry safe? You know, you have this off-season work that you guys have to get done, you know, and right now, you know, whether you're doing in-season prep or off-season prep, you know, that's, you know, seasonal. But tell me about the industry as a whole. You know, is the industry solid going forward? Think of it from the perspective of the kid that wants to get into this. There's a lot of positions. You know, you mentioned 4 full-timers, and that's for a minor league team, a very well financially stable minor league team with the Indianapolis Indians. Some aren't as financially stable. So looking at the industry, you know, around Indiana, you know, all the, you know, the people doing what you do across Indiana, but across the country as well. You know, how, from an industry standpoint, wide angle lens looking in, you know, what's the opportunity look like on the horizon for people doing what you do?
Yeah. God, I wish if I had the answer to that question. Do
any of us know at this point, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think short term, it might not be all that great. But I mean, sports and baseball is going to come back at some point. So I think we're all in some short-term pain, as not only just an industry, but probably as a world in general. But you know, I'm optimistic that we'll have something in 2020, and moving forward to 2021 and beyond. I'm hopeful there. So I think the outlook on baseball and sports in general is going to be positive. It's just we're all trying to navigate through this current situation that nobody knows what to do. But I would say what I've found to be an awesome thing is just our 50 employees or 72 employees is the things that you're seeing us do. What we started our own charity last year, Indianapolis Indians Charities. So some of the things that charity is doing and has done to raise money for people hurt during this pandemic. Some of the things we've put out on social media to keep the Indians front of mind is just from having a 5-year-old, just with what we've done is the coolest things that I can think of is the things we put out on social media, the coloring book things that our design team, they went from designing, I don't even know what they've gone to designing, but preparing for our baseball season. Now they're designing coloring book pages for our young fans. Just some of the cool things that we've done to stay in the public, to help people in need, to keep the Indianapolis Indians on people's minds. And then when we do open back up, which, we're optimistic that July 4th weekend is hopefully going to be an opener for the city, for the state. So there'll be baseball at Victory Field in 2020. I'm confident of that. And we'll be able to open our doors to welcome fans and partners in to utilize our field, our playing surface. But I'm optimistic that there will be baseball at Victory Field in the near future.
Well, I am too. And, one last question. Talking to the kid that wants to get in this, the kid that wants to come, and that view that you have in your background, he wants that to be his office. He's in junior high right now. He's in high school, maybe getting into college. What are you going to tell that kid? What kind of, as far as paying your dues, path, what are you telling that kid looking forward? What's the top priorities to get to where you are today?
I think the most important thing is you've got to care. And that's, you might not have the knowledge or maybe even the skill set yet, but if you care enough to succeed in sports turf, I think that's most important. Someone who cares enough to show up on time, someone who cares enough to stick around and help out past 5 o'clock or anything like that. You just got to have that. I don't know if it just takes a special person or something along those lines, but you have to care, is the big thing. And we can teach the skills. We can teach the knowledge of growing and maintaining soil and turf. We can teach all that, but you've got to have that mentality that you're okay, especially working in any sports. You're okay working behind the scenes. You're no longer that senior pitcher who could throw 80 miles an hour, and you were good, and people wanted to be around you, but because you were that good. But now you got to make that transition to behind the scenes, and it's not all about the glory or per se, but just that behind the scenes, and you've got to care. And that's kind of what we look for when we look to hire somebody to come on board with us.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're watching this, you know what I'm going to say, and that is, again, another recurring theme, which, kind of paraphrasing, summarizing what you just said there is, the care, the passion, have the passion for it, but also do the dirty work, do the work, and some, literally the dirty work, but also like what you hinted at, the non glorious work, the work that doesn't get you on the billboard. Roll up your sleeves, do the work, have the passion, pay your dues, stay the course. And that's kind of the summary I'm taking from a lot of these career videos, and yours as well. You were good at it, you had a passion for it, you paid your dues, and now you got the best office view in the state of Indiana. So, as we wrap things up here, folks, first of all, thank you to Joey Stevenson for taking the time to do this. It's kind of a mixed emotions. Me as a fan, I'm tickled to death to have the opportunity to talk to Joey today. But on the other side of that coin is the reason I get to talk to Joey today is because there's no baseball. And because otherwise his day's full, and he would say, Hardy the Hat Guy. No, I don't have time for Hardy the Hat Guy. Joking, of course, but there's truth in that. Is there's no baseball, and that gives Joey some time, and all these other employees the time as well. You mentioned one thing that stuck with me there is you're talking about all the things the social media and everybody does to keep baseball on their mind. This kind of sums it up for me. On my route to work, which is that big tall building over your left shoulder there, on my route to work, I go out of my way to take either West Street or Washington, Maryland there for one reason, so that every day my cup of coffee is I get to look at Victory Field on my way to work. And that view that I take, and I'm not joking about that, I take that route just so that I can take a quick view of empty Victory Field every morning, and I get to see that beautiful lawn that's the result of your hard work. And on behalf of all the employees for the Indians, the Tin Caps, the Cubs, all over the state of Indiana, my hopes right there with you, Mr. Stevenson, is bring back baseball, not only for fans like me, but for careers, for hardworking people like Joey right here and others we talked to in this series. So folks, thank you for this episode. Stick around for the rest as we travel the state talking careers in baseball. Thank you.